The Norman and Florence Brody Family Foundation is dedicated to exploring topics of national and international importance and is proud to support Policy Watch with Doug Besheroff at the University of Maryland. From the University of Maryland, this is Policy Watch with Doug Besheroff.
Mothers and daughters share a special bond. The early days of mother-daughter relationships are often the easiest, but as teenage years and adulthood approach, once easy conversation can turn exasperating in an instant. What makes mother-daughter dialogue so emotional, and what can be done to help reduce misunderstanding? Today, we discuss mother-daughter communication with Deborah Tannen, acclaimed author and professor of linguistics at Georgetown University. And now, the host of Policy Watch, Doug Besheroff.
Deborah Tannen, welcome back to the University of Maryland and Policy Watch.
Thank you.
You're a linguistics professor. You examine the interconnectedness of dialogue, mainly in the family, but not only, between men and women, between different groups. And then you wrote, "You're wearing that? That's about talk?"
That is about talk between mothers and adult daughters. And it grew out of the book I had written before, which was called I Only Say This Because I Love You. It was about adult family relationships. And when people interviewed me about that book and talked to me about it, they all wanted to talk about the mother-daughter relationship. So it became clear that among the adult family relationships, that seemed to be the most fraught. Many women said the most rewarding, but also the most frustrating of the conversations they have.
Now why? Why not? Father-daughter, son-mother. Why mother-daughter?
Yeah, and it's a question I had to ask myself. And pretty soon the answer kind of bubbled up because we're both women. And all the aspects of women's use of language and relationships comes to bear in a particularly intense way between mothers and daughters. For example, they talk more. In a typical family, if there are brothers as well as sisters, the mother and daughter will talk more than the father and daughter or father and son or mother and daughter. Talk about more personal things. And that means you have more opportunity to say the wrong thing.
They talk about different. Notice I just interrupted her.
Please feel free.
Thank you. Oh, but that's because she passed over something I really want her to say or talk about, which is that there is a difference between how mothers and daughters talk, and let's just keep it with daughters, and fathers and daughters. You talk about in your books about how the fathers tend to talk about more, quote, important things, non-personal things, the news, joking.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to a distinction I make about women and men I call rapport talk versus report talk. So rapport talk is what many women do. So we just want to talk about everything going on in our lives so we feel connected. And we talk about problems and important things as well, decisions to make. For many men, that's sort of pointless. So just being together means we're close. We don't need to talk to be close. So you use language, I sometimes call it report talk. So you're more comfortable talking about sports, the news, or business. So my students tell me, if they talk they call home, usually they will talk to the mother. The father may get on the phone if it's something business, about money in the bank. I can give you a specific example of students that compared their mother and their daughter, and the mother and the father, that I think will show both the wonderful and the risky part of mother-daughter conversation. The first was a young woman who preferred her father's style. She had broken up with her boyfriend, so she felt upset, and she wanted as much input and insight as possible. She talked to her father. He gave his perspective. She appreciated it, and he never brought it up again. She talked to her mother. The mother gave her perspective. She appreciated it. It was very helpful. And then every time they spoke, her mother brought it up. How are you doing, dear? Are you feeling any better? Do you have a date for Saturday night? Have you met anybody new? Has he met anybody new? Finally, she had to say, Mom, please stop bringing it up. You're making it harder. And then her mother was hurt. And then she felt bad that she had hurt her mother's feelings. And she commented then she understood why she often preferred to discuss problems with her friends rather than her mother. And incidentally, this is another setup that her mother will be hurt, because for girls and women, being close means you tell things. So if a mother discovers that there was something going on in her daughter's life, the daughter didn't tell her, she will feel very hurt. Where the father might say, well, she told us when she was ready. But for girls and women, your best friend is the one you tell everything to, especially telling secrets. And that makes you close. And girls and women tend to value closeness and judge relationships by, is it close, is it not close? So for the mother, for the daughter not to be telling her things, she's being locked out, pushed away. And it's almost a setup when the daughter's an adult. She was not going to tell the mother everything when she was little. She probably did. But I'm going to contrast now stories. Another woman a young woman who compared her mother and father and preferred her mother's style. She was sick. She called home. Mother wasn't home, so she talked to her father. Oh, Daddy, I'm sick with the flu. I feel horrible. Everything aches. And he said, take Tylenol. So she said, I did, but it didn't help. I still feel horrible. And he said, well, call the health service and go see a doctor. And she said, I tried to, but everybody's sick. I couldn't get an appointment. And he said, well, I can't help you then. And she realized she had missed what her mother would have done. Oh, you poor thing. I'm so sorry. I wish I was there to make you a cup of tea. Drink lots of liquids. Get plenty of sleep. I'll call tomorrow and see if you feel any better. Now, that's an example of what I call rapport talk. It reassured her that her mother cared. The meta message is, I care. It isn't helping her flu any. And what her father did is what I call report talk. If you have a problem, you try to fix it. If you can't fix it, then no point in talking about it. And this does cause frustration sometimes in heterosexual couples as well.
I'm thinking about this as best I can and trying to figure out what's wrong with what. No. I'm not going there. The word you used is care, and it's that the mother is caring, but is she caring too much?
Well, in the example where a girl had told her mother that she broke up with her boyfriend and then she didn't want to talk about it, the mother's show of concern and caring actually was too much. When she was sick with the flu, the other girl wanted the mother to lay it on thick because that was reassuring and healing in that context. It's always hard to know what's the right blend of showing your concern. Anytime anyone has something bad happen, are you going to mention it so they know you care and potentially remind them of something painful, or not mention it and risk that they may think you've forgotten all about it and you don't care?
So you're supposed to mention this concern once a month, once every 6 weeks.
And this is in a way the answer to tips for everything. You need to develop antenna so that you can pick up from somebody's reaction, whether they are happy that you're asking or not. And if you pick up they're not, then don't do it again. Somebody told me recently how frustrated she was with her actually stepdaughter because something terrible was happening. And she said, I wrote her 4 notes and I called her 3 times and she is not responding. I said, if you write her 1 note and she doesn't respond, that's a signal. She doesn't want to talk about it. Yeah. But if you're not aware that people might have these differences, you might think it's self-evident that it's good to show caring, and then you keep digging yourself deeper.
You had a somewhat difficult relationship with your mom for a number of years. Now, it sounds like from reading your book that part of it was between your first marriage and your second marriage. How often did she bring up that you should find someone, or for all I know, go back?
No, that is a perfect, no, not go back. There was, that was a perfect example of too much caring. My mother was born in Russia in 1911. So she was born in a world where if a woman was married, she was home free. If she was not married, everything was up for grabs, in abeyance until she got married. And she, as a parent, I think, felt that she was responsible for me so long as I was married. If I was unmarried and if I got married, then she was home free as well. I was married at 23 and separated at 29. So we got along great between 23 and 29. Between 18 and 23, we had a lot of trouble because she was always concerned that I should be doing what I needed to do to get married. When I got divorced at 29, she began worrying that I wasn't doing what I should be doing to get another husband. I met the man of my dreams and my permanent husband when I was 40. So that was 11 years where we had a very rocky relationship because she brought it up just about every time.
Oh my goodness.
And she almost didn't know how not to. I mean, I would try to discourage her, but it would bubble out. I'll give you a funny example. I was also kind of a rebel. I did not go right to grad school. I was 30 when I started my program in my PhD. I was traveling around the country and being kind of, she was worried about my career as well. Okay, so at 35, I get my PhD, and then I get a job teaching at Georgetown, and I was publishing and immediately doing quite well in academia. She came to visit. I was so glad she was going to see that I had turned out okay. She saw my office. She saw my home that I had bought. She saw my publications on the shelf, and she was impressed, and she was very pleased. And then she looked at me sort of, puzzlement, and she said, do you think if you had stayed married, you would have accomplished all this? And I said, no, I'm sure I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have gone back to school and gotten a PhD. She thought for a second, and she said, if you had stayed married, you wouldn't have had to. Now, I had told this story many times, and I knew I could depend on my listeners to groan because it showed my mother did not value my accomplishments other than marriage. And I hear this from many professional women, a feeling that their mothers somehow dismiss their professional accomplishments or don't give it as much weight as they believe they should. When I wrote the book, You're Wearing That, and I put in examples of my own as well as other people's examples, I could not stop at my perspective. I had to go on and ask what's her perspective, because I try in that book to show mothers and daughters sides of it, always show both sides. So I had to ask myself, why would she say a thing like that? She was not mean-spirited. She didn't have a mean-spirited bone in her body. Thoughtless, yes, but not mean-spirited. So why would she say a thing like that? And then I thought, try to look at it from her perspective. I was living a life so different from any life she could have imagined for herself. I think she was just trying to get her mind around it. How does a person get to this point in life and what to make of it? I think many women who did not have careers and now see their daughters having careers, they're proud of them. They feel glad that they have that. But they're sad at being left behind because they're now traveling to a country where the mother can't go. I have an image of, watching your daughter soar, and you're proud and it's wonderful, but she's receding in the sky. And it has that disappointment to it too, and I think that's what she was reflecting.
And where do you see that going? We talked about this before the show. In the coming generation, more women will have had successful careers, and certainly in the next generation, that'll be the norm. Where will that take this discussion?
I think every time a mother and a daughter, adult daughter, talk to each other, they are coming from two different worlds. So even if the mother has worked and the daughter has worked, there still may be an element of things are different now. So I'll give an example of a mother who had a career and a daughter who has a career, and they were talking on the phone. The daughter talked about a problem at work, and the mother said, oh, I know what you mean. I had a similar problem. And the daughter cut her off, and she said, will you please stop saying that? It's not the same. Things are different now, and this is my problem. So I think there can be always a sense that even though you understand each other to a degree, you want to feel that this is my life and not yours. I think mothers and daughters always kind of look at each other as reflections of themselves, as a yardstick by which to measure themselves. And sometimes if the mother has had a very successful career, the daughter might feel this is something I can't aspire to. I'll never be able to do it all the way she does. If she's very attractive, I'll never be that attractive. If she's unattractive, oh my God, I don't want to be that unattractive. I mean, it's this constant measurement and looking for bits of yourself in the other, almost like a treasure hunt. Sometimes you like what you find and sometimes you don't. And I think that will probably continue regardless of whether they both have had careers or not.
You talk about reframing conversation. How do mothers and daughters do that?
Okay, reframing is such a helpful concept. It just means you look at something with a different storyline, and often it has to do with caring and criticizing. So many women told me that their mothers are critical, and mothers said to me, "I can't my mouth. She takes everything as criticism." Two sides of the same coin. They're both there. So the mother may need to reframe and realize that any offer of advice, suggestion for improvement is criticism, because someone who isn't doing something wrong doesn't need a suggestion or help for improvement. But the daughter also can reframe and realize that it is caring, especially the big three: hair, clothes, and weight. So many comments that I heard from mothers to daughters and daughters to mothers about appearance. For example, sure. I can always count on my mother to notice if I gain a pound, or a mother saying, "I love your hair when it's smoothed back. It's so beautiful that way." Only she says it when it's falling
out,
forward.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so the mother can reframe and realize it is criticism and perhaps bite her tongue. And the daughter may reframe and realize it is caring. And you might even miss it when she's gone.
In the last show, we talked about the navigating systems in cars saving men who don't like to ask directions. So there's some technologies now that you write about that maybe help smooth mother-daughter relationships. Email, I'd add cell phones and low-cost, long-distance calls.
Yes, and as well as cell phones and instant messaging and text messaging. Every time there's a new technology, it reforms relationships, some for the good, some for the bad. I'm amazed by how frequently many of my female students speak to their mothers. Now that you've got cell phones, you can make a call on the way somewhere where you're too busy to call when you get there. With IM, you might have a conversation, just you're on your computer doing your other work, you get a thing, you answer. Many mothers are worried about calling, they're hesitant to call their adult daughters because the daughters are busy, they have kids, they have a family, they have work, you don't want to interrupt, so you send an email. She can open it when she's ready. You might think things through more carefully before sending the email. She can get it and think about it and then answer at her leisure.
Mothers and daughters and family members in general are just talking to each other much more because it's less expensive, even as we're at different parts of the globe. Our daughter, for example, will sometimes call from the supermarket and say, "Mom, I'm buying this. What do you usually, about that?" That must be for the good.
I think it's mostly for the good. Being a believer in communication, more communication is mostly good. I have heard a mother complain to me, "My daughter calls me all day. How can I get her to stop?" This was a girl in high school. "She's calling me every little problem to solve her problem." I said, "Give her bad advice. She'll stop asking you to solve her problem." I don't think the mother wanted to do that. But yes, there is far more communication. I mean, in my time, we called once a week and that was it.
We've been largely talking about what you'd have to describe as traditional two-parent families and children. The world's changing. More divorce, more non-marital births, therefore more stepchildren, more situations in which there are only one child, one daughter, no siblings, to kind of soften the blow. Let's start with stepdaughters. What do you see there?
Now, I did not look particularly at stepmothers and stepdaughters, but I have to say, judging from the number of people that have asked me about it, it's almost like I've gotten an order that should be a future book. But I think with stepdaughters, you have this, and stepmothers, you have more intensely the conflicts between showing caring and seeming to impose, the power dynamic. You've always got to balance the power dynamic, who's got power over the other, and the connection dynamic, how close or distant do you want to be. And with daughters often will object to a mother, when the mother thinks she's showing caring, you're telling me what to do. I think that can happen even more with stepchildren. There's often conflict. There's always the question of alignment, where there might seem to be an alignment between two family members that leaves a third one out. Now, with a daughter, that can mean that the mother and the daughter are so close that the father feels left out. It can be that the daughter and the father seem to have a rapport that the mother feels left out of. Especially, there's always, women are always under threat from younger women, and well, this is a younger woman in your family. And I think with stepdaughters, that risk of alignment is intensified, so that there may seem to be an alignment between the husband and his own daughter that leaves the stepmother out, or there may seem to be an alignment between the parents where the stepdaughter feels left out.
We're about to run out of time, and I'd like to leave on a positive, although a little melancholy note. You write about an experience that was very similar to the experience I had, which is taking care of a mother who got progressively more frail. And I'll say it, it was about the most rewarding thing I've ever done, but I'll let you talk for a few minutes.
Yes, and I say the same thing. I feel that my mother passed away while I was writing this book, and that did give extra layers of meaning, of significance, of urgency to the book. But I was very fortunate that toward the end of her life, and I say end, she was 93, and it was quite progressive, by having the experience of physically caring for her. And I was not her primary caregiver, but when I visited, I fixed her hair, and I helped her to the bathroom, and I helped her, get into her nightgown, and just that feeling of her putting her hand on my shoulder and resting on her shoulder as I helped her, into her protective underwear. That feeling of physical caretaking just gives you waves of love, and it makes you understand what she might have felt toward me that when I was younger would have just been reason for resentment. And I have a specific example. When I was one time I took a nap on the couch, and I sort of felt a rustle at my feet, and I opened my eyes.
This is when you were visiting her.
I was visiting my mother probably a year before she died. Now, I'm 5'9". My mother was 5'2" at her full height, so I think toward the end she was more like 5 feet, and had lost weight and from illness, and so she's walking with a cane. And I opened my eyes, and she had taken a blanket from the foot of her bed over her one arm, and with the cane had come over to the couch where I was sleeping, and was, manipulating the cane, and with one hand spreading the blanket over my feet. And it was so touching, one of my most precious memories, because she was taking care of me. And I could see that had I been younger, I might have, or a young woman in that position might have said, I can tell if I'm cold, Mom. But when you, the closer you get to losing a parent, and also from, I think, that physical experience of caretaking, that you understand more deeply and feel that connection in a way that previously might have been just intellectual.
Yeah, no, I consider myself very lucky to have had the experience. Deborah Tannen, thank you so much for being on Policy Watch here at the University of Maryland.
Thank you.
And now it's time for us to take questions from our audience. And I'll ask you all to state your names before we start.
My name is Tina Smith. And Deborah, when you were doing your research on conversations between mothers and daughters, I'm sure you had many aha moments. But is there something in particular that really stuck out for you about your relationship with your mom?
Oh, with my own mother?
Yes.
I would have to say for me it was being able to see things from her perspective. The example that I gave you was, excuse me, the example of that I gave of how she, that comment she had made, if you'd gotten married, stayed married, you wouldn't have had to accomplish all this. And I think that did partly happen also because of her aging. I think that might have happened a bit, but it was certainly speeded that every example I gave, after I gave it, I couldn't stop where I had stopped all my life telling those same stories to my friends. I had to move on and say, what was her perspective? Why would she have said this?
Hi, my name is Ellen Butts, And you were talking about mothers and daughters, and I'm a mother of sons. And I've often said to people, I think it's really easier to be a mother of sons because it just doesn't seem as fraught with emotion. And I know I compare it with the way I grew up with my mother, and I wouldn't want to repeat the experience. So, but I also feel when I see mothers and daughters shopping together or when they grow up and often daughters get closer to their mothers, I feel that I'm missing something.
It's correct that you're both missing out on some of the fraughtness and missing out on some of the benefits. So, and it gets back to kind of the way I would start, that a woman saying, my conversations with my daughter are the best and the worst of all possible conversations. It's wonderful that you can talk about anything. And, you know, who else would be interested? Who else can I tell I got a good deal on toilet paper? You know, you can go, somebody who's interested in all the details, and you can go shopping together. You miss that. But you also miss that experience that you think you're having a great conversation, and then you say something and you don't know what it is, but suddenly everybody's back is up. So I think probably both are true.
Thank you.
Deborah Tannen, you're wearing that. Deborah, thanks again.
Thank you.
This program was produced by the University of Maryland, which is solely responsible for its content. The Norman and Florence Brody Family Foundation is dedicated to exploring topics of national and international importance and is proud to support Policy Watch with Doug Besheroff at the University of Maryland.